Hello, and welcome to the Lakers Exceptionalism podcast. My name is Tom Z, joined as always by Tim, aka Cranjis McBasketball. And today we are joined by Jovan Buha, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Lakers, and host of the Buha's Block podcast. Go check out his work on The Athletic and subscribe to Buha's Block on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And shout out to the Late Night Gang and the awesome community over there, Jovan. Disappointing loss, Lakers playoff opener. How you doing today, man? We'll dive all into it, but first, how are you?
I'm doing okay. It was a bit of a rough rewatch this morning. Got up to rewatch it before the show today, and so, yeah, I've had better rewatches.
Indeed. Tim, you surviving over there after your late night deep dive?
I'm so tired. Yeah, I rewatched and I logged the offense last night. I woke up this morning, Christ had risen, and I rewatched Minnesota's offense, which had never been down. They had everything all game long. Uh, yeah, I ended up logging their offense, and I feel like the more I've watched, the better I feel. But I know our playback stream last night did not feel good, and I don't have good vibes about this game. But we'll get through it.
Yeah, I'll take any exceptionalism I can get on this Sunday morning. And yeah, let's get into it. Jovan, I'm curious what you took. What was your biggest takeaway from how everything went down with the team last night?
I think the biggest concern for me was the Lakers' inability to contain the ball, and I thought we knew, especially based on the February 27th matchup against Minnesota, the Lakers' initial strategy against Ant, which was their greening defense, and they were trying to shade him to certain spots on the floor, particularly on the sidelines and the baseline. And I thought, especially in the first quarter, they did a good job with that. But I thought, like, that is partly predicated on keeping him on the sideline, and Minnesota did a good job of countering that and getting him into the middle of the floor. There were several possessions where they had like 1-4 flats, but also just high pick and roll, getting the switch with Luka or Austin or even sometimes Rui, and then just his acceleration. And with Ant, it was a lot of driving to kick out, not as much driving to create for himself. And I thought Minnesota's spacing principles and just the way that they were attacking LA, that they kind of knew where the help was going to be, and their shooters were ready, and they made a lot of in rewatching it, a lot of open threes. Like, I know the shooting percentage is not going to be sustainable. They're not going to make 21 threes every game. They're not going to shoot 50% every game, but they got a lot of good looks. And I think that what was a bit like, it felt like the Lakers didn't really take much away. Like, Ant didn't have an efficient game, 22 points on 22 shots, but 9 assists, 1 turnover. It just felt like Minnesota picked them apart. And I thought, like, round one, in my opinion, went to Minnesota in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, in that first quarter, the Lakers were doing well. Tim and I were calling the game on playback, pointing out how little Minnesota seemed to be prepared for that kind of defense despite seeing it already. And then, boom, as soon as the second quarter started, get a little bit more small ball, space the floor out there with Reed. You see how that spacing can really affect things. Tim, what are some other things you saw in terms of the difference between that first quarter and kind of that middle portion of the game on defense?
Yeah, Minnesota started to figure out the help. In the first half, I have the Lakers sending help 12 different times, mostly from that greening, like we talked about, like Jovan mentioned. And on those 12 plays, only 3 of them did Minnesota try to counter it in any meaningful way. In the second half, there were 9 such possessions, and 5 of the 9 they countered. So more than half the time they were countering. And there were even more plays where the Lakers weren't able to send help because Minnesota was smart about clearing guys out of the wings. They had almost a 1-4 low look where if you were going to try to get up close enough to take away an Anthony Edwards driving lane, you were going to be so far away from your own man that you weren't able to recover. So creating double gaps, attacking that way worked well for them. Interestingly, on the 11 Ant isolation possessions I have logged where he was the scorer, he scored 2 points on 11 plays, which I mean, really good for LA, but also just such a missed opportunity. And to me, that's the biggest thing is like they started slow. We were talking about how they looked unprepared for this. LA couldn't take advantage. Ant on the full game wasn't scoring well in this. LA couldn't take advantage. It was disappointing. I think that stood out to me the most. Minnesota hitting everything, I think, helped obscure not very good process on their end. I went through and logged their half court offense the same way I usually do for the Lakers to try to, know what was going on instead of just guess or try to remember, or try to aggregate in my head. And they ran good sets, but like they were organized only 51% of the time. When they were running plays, only 39% of them actually attacked the coverage the Lakers were running. So they were struggling to attack LA switching. And then, like I mentioned, 38% help counter rate is also not very good. So that's a bad scheme output overall. It would be a D plus scheme score grade in my methodology. Their execution was a C in terms of their possession quality compared to what we'd expect based on those scheme factors. So they got what you'd expect. They didn't get much, but the shot making was incredible on their end. And then the transition game was just such a backbreaker for me. That was not a factor I expected to go Minnesota's way. They had quite an edge. They were incredibly efficient. And in the second and the third quarters specifically, they had as much production and as many opportunities as the Lakers had the whole game in transition. So you cannot give them easy second chances, and the Lakers did on putbacks. You can't give them easy buckets in transition, and the Lakers did. Part of that's the Lakers offense. But the size was a concern of ours heading into this, and we definitely got to see that. And it seemed to wear on the Lakers throughout the game as we got further and further along.
Yeah, Jovan, Jackson Hayes, 8 minutes, 13 seconds. What did you think about what the team saw from him? How they didn't start him in the second half? We didn't call it out on playback, Tim, but it stood out a lot more on the rewatch. What did you think about how Jackson was handled, and if maybe they should use him more?
Well, this is something that Tim and I discussed on our preview pod on my show, and I was a little skeptical of Jackson's role in this series, just because it is counterintuitive. But when the Lakers have played bigger teams, I've just noticed that, especially looking at OKC, Houston, like he's played less in some of those games, and I didn't think it was going to be 8 minutes, granted, and I thought like he at least was had some tip outs. He did have a couple lobs that he didn't finish. So I don't know if that was a deciding factor for JJ in terms of just if he's not finishing well, if he's not being a factor offensively, maybe let's just go smaller and try to space them out. But I think you just mentioned like the size and length and athleticism discrepancy. That would be the other thing that really stood out to me. Like I think because we saw LA handle that well in recent matchups against OKC, Memphis, Houston, I think I'm just going to speak for me here. I assumed they would handle that better, and it really stood out to me. Like it
Yeah.
just looked like it looked like a video game at times, where like Minnesota was on the turbo button and the Lakers were just like kind of slow and unathletic. And I think I baked that into my Lakers in 6 pick, but
Sure.
actually seeing it out there, it was like, well, this might be Lakers in 7 now if they're going to win this thing, just because Minnesota, I think, has certain physical advantages that like you can only game plan and scheme for to an extent. And then it just comes down to like Rui gets a swing pass in the left corner, and it looks like he's going to have an open or like semi-contested three. Naz Reid closes out and blocks it. And it's just like you can't scheme for their length. Like they just have a length advantage over LA. I think that was something that really stood out. But I think moving forward, if we're looking ahead to game 2, and I don't want to spoil any adjustments, but like I think Jackson and Vando probably just have to play more. And those two guys combining for 22 minutes in this matchup, I get why JJ sometimes wants to go smaller and space out and switch everything. And I think you could do elements of that still with Jackson and Vando. But I just think they need more size, especially on the defensive glass, rim protection. Like it felt like Minnesota blew a lot of shots around the basket that like maybe the trade-off is not as many threes, but more layups and more shots in the paint. Like I think that's something that they could probably do a bit better. So I think Jackson needs to be at least in the mid-teens. And I think Vando, especially looking at how he impacted the late third quarter run, Like, he's someone who probably should be closer to 18 to 20 minutes. So I think in general, LA needs to play a little bit bigger and leverage some of their length and athleticism better on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, Tim, pretty much every Lakers player coach talked about their lack of physicality and being prepared for what this series would look like matching up with the big Minnesota squad. One thing I wanted to point out, I've seen people to discuss that this is a bad thing for the Lakers, that Minnesota had 21 fouls to the Lakers only having 10. The Lakers got a great whistle, et cetera, et cetera. I think this plays into what you're talking about, Jovan, that the Lakers, despite having that, frisky, hard to get in their heads and out bully small ball lineup, the Lakers weren't as physical with those groups. And I think Vando is really the only one physically that was ready to take a punch in the mouth and to give a punch back, for lack of a better phrase, Tim. But the physicality thing, I know, tactics is a huge part of this that you're so good at covering, but what did you think about how the Timberwolves were able to body the Lakers in the offensive glass and kind of take advantage of their size?
Yeah, we knew it would be a weakness, and it was more of a weakness than I expected, based just on how much we saw Vando play, how much we saw Jackson play. I was expecting more from Jackson, and the primary reason behind that was I expected Minnesota to be hedging and blitzing in this game as their primary screen coverage. So was JJ.
So
In,
was
in his
JJ.
post
Yeah.
game, he talks about how they were expecting the 4v3s and the trapping, and they didn't get that. The first play of the game from the Lakers was a horn set where they ran a stack ball screen, roll and replace concept, which is a hedge beating concept. So you don't call the first play of the game as a hedge beater if you were expecting to face a switching defense. Minnesota last playoffs against Luka and Dallas hedged as their primary coverage and hedged more than any other series of the playoffs. When we saw this team in the regular season this year with Luka, I know they didn't have their full big man rotation, but they were still hedging quite a bit. So I think it was right of the Lakers to expect that style of defense from Minnesota. And Tom, before the game tipped off, I was telling you yesterday on playback, like, this is where I'm the most nervous, because I don't know if the Lakers are going to see what I'm seeing and how they're going to game plan, nor do I know if the opponent is going to, go with the style of play we're expecting. Because if you could tell me Minnesota's going to be switching as like a primary screen coverage, I think the analysis on my end would have been a lot different. And a big part of that would have been less Jackson Hayes, because he has played less in those games this season. And he's played much more in games where defenses are hedging. And that's because he's a good lob threat, a roll man. You get that with the kinds of plays the Lakers run against hedging defenses. And against switching, the Lakers don't really use any north-south ball screen, like get the inside seal and try to hit the roll man sorts of plays the way that the Darvin Ham Lakers did. The most used play for the Lakers under Darvin Ham was a switch beating concept. It works against soft hedging as well, where they would get that spread ball screen with a step up inside seal, and you would see so often LeBron hit AD or hit Jackson Hayes or whoever it would happen to be. They ran this 323 times last season for 1.27 points per possession, and like elite offense. The year prior, they ran it 240 times for 1.22 points per possession. This season, they've only run it 52 times for 1.28 points per possession. And so, less than once per game. We didn't see it at all last night. And that was a big difference. Both offenses were attacking switching defenses. Minnesota did a good job trying to get underneath their new defender, and that collapsing the defense and then spraying out to 3-point shooters. Whereas LA was not creating any sort of pressure. They were allowing Minnesota to stay inside of them at all times in all the actions. And that put a lot of pressure on their individual ball handlers to create an edge. And it also takes Jackson's value away as a roll man. So LA kind of responded the way they usually do against switching defenses. And I think that really hurt them on the defensive end of the court. Vando and Jackson converted 100% of their defensive rebounding opportunities in this game that they didn't defer to a teammate. When they were off the court, it was much worse. And so This is something that, in order to fix the defense and see more Jackson and Vando, I think you kind of have to fix the offense a little bit.
Sure.
I think it's all related. And that was, I think that definitely plays into the physicality point, because there were times Jackson was a good deterrent at the rim or a disruptor at the rim. I understand he's not great at those things for a big man, but there's a difference between a guy that size and like playing a DFS on the inside. DFS is not a good defensive rebounder. We saw that in this game. He only converted a third of his defensive rebounding opportunities. Not high volumes, of course, in a single game sample, but those sorts of little things stack up over the course of a series. And if LA's not going to be able to play their size, it is a horrible, horrible sign for their like playoff big picture future, but is, it might be the death blow to this series as well. They need to find ways to get their size on the court.
Yeah, Jovan, I think takeaways looking at the Lakers' big three on offense, it was just Luka who came kind of back in rhythm and in his regular season form. Austin had a bit of a spurt there in the second, but he looked rough. I think both he and LeBron started 1 for 5. So even with they have a mismatch maybe on the perimeter and they're kind of not in rhythm at the same time, this Lakers offense can struggle. I don't know. Have you heard anything about LeBron's injury, or is this just kind of one of those chalk it up, just bad game, move on to the next?
I'll be honest, like I was a little concerned with how LeBron looked
Yeah,
offensively.
me
I
too.
thought his inability to beat Minnesota's bigs off the dribble, like and really create separation and advantages. I thought in the second half you saw he got some off ball stuff with like a couple give and goes or like weak side cuts from the slot. And I think that's maybe a way to get LeBron a little bit more involved. Like there was one play where Luca was sort of in the dunker spot and had a post up, and then LeBron cut from the slot and got a finish. And like I think we saw when LeBron was able to gain momentum off the ball and like beat someone to a certain spot, he was able to create separation and get to the rim and finish. But when it was actually like, let's run a pick and roll and get Naz Reid on me, get Julius Randle on me, or try to get Gobert on me, uh, taking those guys off the dribble, like they were hanging with him. And there was the back-to-back plays in the second quarter as Minnesota was making that run where Gobert blocks him, then Naz Reid blocks him, then Minnesota gets threes on both the ensuing transition possessions. That's like a 10-point swing right there. And I thought just offensively, he did not like it was kind of some of the early stuff we saw post groin injury. And he did obviously tweak it a little bit in that Houston game. So we asked him about it going into the game, and he said, I'm going to play in game one. And that's all he said about it. And I think you could read into that what you will. But just looking at it offensively, I don't think he had quite the same burst and athleticism off the dribble. I think off the ball, yes. And I think if I'm LA, I'm looking at some of the film and saying, okay, how can we find ways to leverage LeBron's still has the top end speed that he could beat just about anybody. I think once he gets a head start, but actually creating that advantage himself, I think he struggled to do that against Minnesota. And that's kind of a swing factor here offensively, where if Naz Reid and Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert can hang with LeBron on switches, that's like I think a real factor for LA's offense. And then Austin, I thought was a bit rushed early. Like he short arm some floaters, and defensively, like Dante DiVincenzo was cooking him. He kept falling for the shot fake. I think he needs to be better on both ends. Like that first half was arguably his worst half of the season. Like he was pretty rough on both sides of the ball. I think he will be better. I do think this is a tough matchup for him because guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels are long and rangy, and like those are the types of defenders that have historically given Austin some problems just because of the length there. Even Rudy on some of the switches, he just kept his arm up, and I thought that affected some of Austin's shots. So this might be a little bit of a tougher Austin series, I think, just based on their length and athleticism. But for LeBron, I think they have to find a way to get him going earlier. He should not be getting his first field goal like 8 minutes, with 8 minutes left in the second quarter. So yeah, it was just Luka. Luka did whatever he wanted, but that was kind of the strategy. He had 1 assist, 5 turnovers. Like I think if you're Minnesota, you take the 37 points, 1 assist, and 5 turnovers every night. It felt like a little bit what Boston did in the finals as well. Of just like we're going to let Luka, we're going to switch. We're going to let him do his thing. If he drops 40, he drops 40. But the Lakers, the Wolves still won, even with him cooking any and everybody.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to what I saw in the film. It was shocking to me that for as much switching as Minnesota did, along with for just what their normal matchups look like. We talked about that, Tom on our pod and Jovan on your pod, just put your 5 guys out there against their 5 guys. You don't have to run anything. We've got something we can go to between ISO, post ups, or ball screens. And through all of the, all the switching and all of the natural advantages, there was only one possession on the game where I logged that they sent extra help beyond just kind of normal help rotations. If you drive, of course, they have to rotate, but more proactive help. There was only one play all game, which to me is shocking and really concerning. If it were a situation where LA was drawing a bunch of help and then just didn't execute help beaters, or the reads weren't there, or they were missing shots, that's one thing. We weren't even drawing two. They were giving up, Gobert on LeBron, or Naz Reid on LeBron, or Gobert on Luka, and then not needing to send a second defender. And that is how we end up with Luka not having the passing output that we're used to seeing from him. It's what we had seen for Anthony Edwards on the season against switching defenses, and why I was, excited about him against that defense in this series. We got to see it on the other end. In terms of LeBron and Austin creating their own scoring chances, I thought their expected points per possession, not just, ignore the shot making, they had bad shooting games, but looking at the quality of the shots they were able to create for themselves, freelancing compared to in sets, there was a stark difference. For LeBron, freelancing 0.69 expected points per possession, really, really bad offense. Even if he does have a good shooting game, it's still not great offense. He had 2 buckets all game in freelance. In sets, he was at 1.27. That's excellent offense. So when they were having him come off of down screens or setting up post ups, he was, catching and shooting as a spot up guy, of course, he's going to get easier shots, but that worked well for him. On Austin's side, he had 2 freelance points on the whole game, 0.75 expected points per possession freelancing compared to 1.09 within the sets. And that kind of mirrors a general takeaway from me in the game is just LA sets worked. They were able to get what they wanted on off-ball screens. They got good shots. On post-ups, they ended up with good shots. In ball screens, they got good shots. And they just weren't calling enough plays from my perspective. There was a pretty big difference between the scoring output as well as the shot quality for them freelancing compared to running their stuff. And when they were facing switching defenses, on only 28% of those possessions did they try to run anything. Whether or not it was good for switching defenses or not, only 28% of the time they tried to run a set, which is very, very low. It's well below their season average. They were at 40% against drop, 67% against hedging. And against all 3 of them, they were better with the sets than the freelance. But just the complacency to freelance against switching, along with that lack of burst from LeBron, the lack of drawing 2 from Luka, Austin struggles. It was a very different game than I expected to see. And when the freelance switch beating offense isn't there and you don't have that safety blanket, it puts a lot of pressure on JJ and the staff to be really sharp with the scheme. And it wasn't close to their best effort yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you called out this stretch, Jovan, because on my rewatch, I wrote this whole thing down. In about 7 minutes, Jackson Hayes gets a 3-second violation for not 2-9ing, which is extremely frustrating. So you lose a point there. Minnesota gets a good look at 3, but misses. Luka doesn't get a call. LeBron has to have that chase down block, which was encouraging. He did look great there in classic LeBron. But then Rui attacks Gobert, gets blocked. LA plays Ant well, but gives up an offensive rebound kickout 3. LeBron attacks Reed, blocked. Layup in semi-transition for DiVincenzo. LeBron attacks Gobert, blocked. Transition corner 3. LA goes down 5 to down 13 in a matter of a minute, less maybe. It was really, really bang, bang, and it really blew the game open for Minnesota, getting easy points in transition. The Lakers trying to attack. Like Reed's not a Gobert rim protector, but he's not somebody who you're just going to not be able to get into the body of, and you have to force your way into a little bit of an open space there to get a shot off. And I didn't think any of those were smart decisions. And Tim, we talked about how often a block shot or a missed shot at the rim can turn to points for the other team. I feel like that really let Minnesota off the hook offensively in that stretch and got them good transition looks.
Yeah, it was a really disappointing stretch. And it was also set up right before that, too, by I'm looking at my logging of the half court offense. Open catch and shoot 3 missed, hit a tough short mid-range jumper, open short mid-range jumper missed, open catch and shoot 3 missed, open shot at the rim missed.
This is the Lakers
Um,
offense.
this is the Lakers offense.
Yeah.
LeBron got a bucket and one, and then Rui missed an open three. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 missed open shots in 7 possessions, and then a shooting foul drawn by Hayes on a dump off, and then we get to block in a row on the Lakers side with Minnesota on their end getting what they wanted. So it was like missed opportunity, and then like, oh no, this is going in a really bad place. And between the two, you had a chance to kind of take the lead that you didn't jump on, and then like you mentioned, the deficit really ballooning, and that seemed to take some air out of the wings of the team.
Yeah, right before we get here to adjustments for game 2, Jovan, I was paying attention. JJ talked about the second quarter to third quarter run that Minnesota went on. I know he went to about the 4 or 5 minute mark. I have 59-26 run from the start of the second quarter up to 7 minutes, or just under 7 minutes in the third. Do you think this was a lack of adjustment, being ready for these, not hedge blitzing from the team, or is this kind of the, you know, feel it out game that LeBron tried to kind of frame it as? I'm trying to figure out where the team's trying to land on this. I know LeBron and JJ might disagree, and LeBron's one of the best media trained guys in the world. So curious what you unpacked from that press conference last night.
I think the Lakers feel it was more of a feel it out game. My I think my concern would just be they had so much time to prepare, and this was as much rest as they were going to have. And I feel like it would be one thing if the process was better, and if Cranjis was giving us the numbers right now, and it was 65% offensive organization rate, 70%, but like the shot making like wasn't there. I
Yeah.
think I'd feel a bit better about it in that sense. But to me, like the process was concerning, and they had almost 6-7 days to prepare for this, and really when factoring in the regulars didn't play, against Portland, that was closer to like 9-10 days, and it wasn't really like a rust thing. Like maybe there was some element of that with some of the shot making, but it just from a process perspective, it felt like, again, outside of the first quarter where I thought the initial strategy was good, once Minnesota adjusted, they did not really have much of a counter. And I think the big thing for me too is they have to figure out what they want to do with Ant. And I wonder if the best approach is going to just be similar to how Minnesota is guarding Luka. It's just like, okay, we're going to switch everything. And
Yeah.
if Ant is going to ISO Austin, ISO Luka, and hit step back, pull up jumpers, like you got to live with that, and you got to take away the Naz Reid corner threes, or guys being spaced in certain spots where if there is an offensive rebound, like it felt like that was very intentional on their end of just anytime there was an offensive rebound, they knew where the closest guy was, and that seemed very choreographed to an extent of just, okay, offensive rebound, this is where guys are relocating to, and it's the corners or it's the wings, and immediately kick out pass open threes. So I think the Lakers got to be, again, kind of careful with how they guard Ant. And I thought the initial, like, ultimately he had 22 points on 22 shots. So like, I think you live with that, but it just felt like whenever he wanted to generate an advantage, he did, and they were just a step slow, and I think over helping and over rotating. But in terms of that it just felt like everything avalanched for them, and all these like you were talking about the run there, and it was like, okay, miss shot, transition, turnover, transition, and I think the 25-6 discrepancy in fast break points, and that isn't even really accurate, right? Because of how the box score transition points are calculated. Like it's not always representative of what it actually was. It felt like it was a bigger gap than 25-6, and just they're like the jury's out on the Lakers defense. If you can run on them, you can get good looks, and I think that's something that they really have to do a better job of containing in game 2, because Minnesota, like when it becomes an athlete kind of track meet, Minnesota's going to beat them every time. Like they just have better athletes, that they're quicker, they're more explosive, they're more athletic. We saw with Ant, like just some of the plays he had. I mean, he crossed up Rui, but just some of his acceleration, like when he wants to get by you, he gets by you. So I think that's something LA is going to have to figure out, because I think you can't let Ant dictate the terms of engagement offensively the way he did, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Minnesota being able to continue being big while LA was small and having Gobert as like a dump off option made it really, really challenging. I mean, it's already hard if you are an anchor big and that's your normal job and you're 7 feet tall and you need to try to defend a drive and also worry about the dump off. When it was Rui doing that or DFS doing that or LeBron doing that, they had no chance. Either they would feign some sort of rim protection and then just back up and try to get into Gobert's body, or they would completely leave him alone either for lobs or for putbacks. And so any sort of breakdown on the perimeter, once you got to the second level of the defense, was a big issue for the Lakers when they were small. We saw a bit of that during the stretch. We also happened to see Minnesota's best offensive stretch of the game from a process standpoint. They were at a 67% organized offense rate from the start of the second quarter until 4:30 to go in the third. They were only 39% for the rest of the game. So they went from an elite offense during this one stretch to like pretty bad the rest of the game. During each game, you can kind of draw lines like that. It just happened to line up well with their run. In terms of their coverage fit and attacking what LA was showing them, they were at 75% during this stretch and then 43% the rest of the game. So we got elite offense for Minnesota. This is the kind of stuff that if the Lakers were doing it, we've only really ever seen Death Star offensive production from the team. So that's what Minnesota was running. And then the rest of the game, it wasn't great. It wasn't enough of the game. LA wasn't able to take advantage. But yeah, Minnesota played really well. The Lakers did not play well during that stretch. And yeah, I forget what the question was, Tom. But
no, that's great.
I can confirm, didn't go well.
Yeah.
And on the Lakers end, there was a little bit of shooting underperformance, but it wasn't anything drastic. It was 0.07 points per possession. So a little bit.
So, Jovan, looking forward to game 2, what are some adjustments you'd like to see that the Lakers could use to put themselves in a better position? Because I agree with what you said. It wasn't just that the Timberwolves shot making went crazy, they were open. So, would you like to see them play Ant more one-on-one? What are some other things you'd like to see the team focus on for a game 2 win?
I'd like to see them play Ant more one-on-one. And if he's going to drop 40, then he's going to drop 40. But I think similar to how they guarded Luka, there are ways to take away the supporting cast. And I think, like, and again, 22 points is not like, it wasn't his best offensive performance in that sense. But I thought he was very, yeah, he was masterful, I thought, with his playmaking and decision making, and really just like, it took him a quarter to kind of figure out the Lakers defense, but once he figured it out, I thought he knew how to manipulate it, and then all of a sudden he was generating wide open threes. So I think that that's something that they're just gonna have to live with, like, Rui or Austin or whoever, DFS is going to be the primary guy on him. You got to dance with him and do your best to contest it and force a contested jumper. If he's going to make it, again, similar to Luka, like Luka dropped 40, the Lakers lost by 20, right? So you can still win that way if a guy is going off. It's really, you don't want the guy to go off and his supporting cast to go off. So I think I would try to at least test what that looks like, of playing Ant straight up a little bit more. And then, obviously helping in certain scenarios and shading over in certain scenarios. But I thought they were a little bit too over aggressive and not able to, like, the closeouts were awful. I thought, like, a lot of awful closeouts, or just not closing out at all. But like, just rewatching, that was something that stood out, was just a lot of lackadaisical, or just, this guy's too far for me to even close out to, so I'm not even going to try. Whereas I thought with Minnesota, you saw, like, there were several times Ant just jumped and kind of did the Rui Cornet thing. It almost like goaltended it, because you can just jump out of the gym. So that's something that I think they could do better defensively. Obviously, have to do a better job sandwich rebounding, gang rebounding. Like they were beat to, outside of the first quarter, they were beat to too many loose balls. Offensively, I think it's obvious they got to run more organized offense. I'd like to see more double drags, more stacks, maybe some more horns, but like, get like, they went to it a little bit late in the third with some 3-man actions for the big three, and I'd like to see that. But I think the other thing is, like, who they target, and they did it a little bit more in the second half. But I think they need to target Mike Conley more, and Minnesota did a good job of sometimes trying to kind of hedge or momentarily blitz with him and then recover and keep him out of certain switches. So I think you got to spam that more. Like we talked about going in the series is like how big of a role is Mike Conley going to have? They didn't really target him or play him off the floor. Like he was able to be out there just fine. So I think targeting him. I think with LeBron and Luka, maybe targeting Dante and Nickeil Alexander-Walker a little bit more. We saw Luka get some post-ups against Dante in the second half. LeBron take Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the dribble. So like I think their entry points into their defense, I think, are the smalls and not the bigs. I think we saw against the bigs, they were able to stay big and either contest and force contested jumpers or block shots, deter shots on drives. So I don't think the Lakers trying to switch Rudy or Nas or Julius onto some of their smalls is the way to go. I think it's the inverse of target the small guys and make them have to adjust how they're guarding some of these actions. And maybe then they have to start doubling or over helping. And that's when you get the swing passes, the kick out passes, the reversals to the weak side, and you create advantage. Because as Tim was saying earlier, like the Lakers just didn't create many advantages. They did when they ran stuff, but there was far too many times it was just drawing a switch and then going to dance. And they didn't have the shot making, and it's just not really a sustainable type of approach offensively. So I think I like to see with Ant just try to stop helping as aggressively, but because I think again it didn't really work. And he just picked it apart. I also thought Julius did a good job making some reads. We talked about Julius going to the series. Like I thought he made a lot of smart decisions. And then offensively has to be staying disciplined, running more stuff, involving more guys. Luka was going off in the first, but I still felt like it was a little too heliocentric. I think he could do a better job of involving his teammates. And it's tough when he's making everything right, but still, it just felt like too many possessions where it was just Luka touching the ball 80% of the time, and then other guys weren't as involved. So I think that they got to find a better approach offensively. That's to me the biggest area of growth.
I love that. I think that's great analysis. And Tim, we were losing our minds pretty much the whole game about those poor closeouts, overextension, bad angles, all kinds of things, helping off corners. But we know you love this chess game, Tim. Hit us with your adjustments as quick as you can so we can kind of get it back and forth, hopefully. I mean, we know you can do an hour on this alone, and I'm sure we will at some point keep talking about these adjustments. But yeah, what do you think, man? What do the Lakers need to focus on here to get a win?
All right, so quick hitters. I think instead of trying to attack outside in, I'd like to attack inside out. I want to use the size. I want to use the post game. We know LA has a good playbook for attacking hedging. We know they have a great roster for attacking hedging. We felt good about the series because we anticipated attacking hedging. The one time we really got to see hedging from Minnesota was on inverted ball screens. Keep doing that. Jovan just talked about pulling Mike Conley in the action. He'd kind of show and recover. Keep doing that. And the two options are, they're not going to put Mike Conley in drop. So either he's going to show and recover or he's going to switch. If he switches, go back him down into the post. If he doesn't switch, you have a 4-on-3 and you've got LeBron James making the passing read. And I'm happy with that. And so whether it's hitting Austin in a short roll or Gabe on a ghost screen or whatever it happens to be, let's draw the numbers advantage and play off of that. Ideally, you're able to do this with Minnesota's bigs in the action, but they're not giving us that right now. And so if you can do it, I'll take a 4v3 or a 3v2, even if Gobert is one of the three or one of the two in there. So I would start that way. If you can do well enough with it, you can probably get them to start switching Mike Conley onto LeBron James or switching Na or DiVincenzo or some of those guys onto LeBron more willingly. And then you could try to go to work. We only saw one post up against the switching defense. It was for a bucket and a foul. And we saw Rui go after Conley early in the first quarter in like their normal cross-matched mismatch, like second or third play of the game. He settled for a fadeaway mid-range jumper. Like, get to the rim against those guys is what I'd be looking to do. Draw some help, run your help beaters. So I'd start there. Against drop, which we did see in this game. The Lakers need to do a better job of getting deeper into the paint and engaging the dropping big. Way too often they take one or two dribbles off of it and then immediately try to pass to the pop. and they let Gobert defend both pretty easily because they weren't creating much room for him to have to recover. So if you can try to engage him with just one more dribble, give me like 3 dribbles and then kick it out, you're going to get wide open threes instead of lightly contested threes, or lightly contested threes instead of heavily contested threes. So that would be a good way to attack the drop a little bit better. We did see LA twice in a row call a play, I think in the third quarter, where they would pick and pop, and then they would cut a perimeter player out of the way so that the pop was into a double gap. There was no one anywhere close that could help. And it worked the first time. They got a good look. The second time, Minnesota immediately decided we're going to switch now. So you can probably get them into switching. Against the switching, I need to see LA probably do 2 things. One of them is start using those step up ball screens. We know they have it in the playbook. They have not used it nearly as much as Ham and his group did, but you've got the personnel for it. It works great with LeBron or Vando or Hayes as your screeners getting that ball, attacking in the short roll. I know Jovan likes him some Jackson Hayes short roll playmaking, and I can get behind it as well. I think that would be a good way to, again, you're creating an advantage. You are
Free
attacking
Jackson.
A coverage. Yeah, exactly. through Jackson, you're attacking a coverage that is built in a way where you're usually switching so you don't have to allocate extra resources. But if you can get underneath your new defender as the roll man, you're catching now with your guy on your back and with the numbers advantage. So that would be a similar way as we've been talking about to get LA attacking downhill a little bit more. The other thing they can do is, and we didn't really see this last game, which surprised me, using that short action like we've talked about. If we think about them running like double drag, but instead of dribbling off of both screens, passing to the second screener, and then either chasing your pass to get a handoff, or if the first screen is switched and you can get that inside position again, that first screener rolling to the rim, and now the second screener who has a deeper position at the elbow, he has a much easier feed to that roll man instead of your ball handler trying to hit that sharp angle pass. So that's something that is very much in LA's playbook. I was shocked they didn't run it, and I expect that will absolutely be part of the game plan for game 2. So attack the drop better, induce the hedging a little bit more, attack the switch more, try to attack inside out, get LeBron some more chances, get Luka some more chances to draw fouls, rack up some fouls on these Minnesota defenders where you do have a size advantage. On the other end of the court, I think I'll take a different stance. At least in the plays that I was logging, where I saw the Lakers using that greening concept like we talked about, they had success from my perspective. I have Minnesota's offense at 0.78 expected points per possession and 0.81 actual points per possession, which I am comfortable with. They got a little bit hot later in the game, but most of the open threes they were generating weren't with LA sending help. It was with LA playing 1v1, allowing it to get downhill, and then having to rotate, more so than sending proactive help, but having to rotate. And then he seemed to have the court mapped really well in his head and was finding open guys. So I would try to keep him on the perimeter, because I think that backline defense, especially if you're small, won't get the job done. I think you have to try to defend the rim by deterring drives in the first place. So I think LA's kind of living on the edge with it, because Minnesota started to figure it out late in the game. But if they're only going to counter it 40-ish% of the time, and all things considered, even this is including the counters and not countering, they were at about 0.8 of a point per possession. I'll take it. Like, force them to take me out of it, and then just clean up the easy stuff. Don't be in the popcorn machine.
Yeah.
Don't be jumping on closeouts. That's easy. I think that's stuff that obviously they're going to point out and try to clean up. And it was uncharacteristic of LA, so I don't think it'll be hopefully something we see in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Working on the small ball lineup video, they did some of the worst rotations on the backside that I've seen in a lot of this film, good and bad. And Jovan, something I'm curious about and how you can unpack this loss is a lot of different ways. It's a big what did we learn and why did we learn it? So I think both what you were describing is a completely understandable defensive strategy to adjust to react to. And I think what Tim's laying out is fair as well. I mean, this team led by 7, giving up 21 points in the first quarter. So I guess how do you think JJ will respond in terms of adjustments and how he'll unpack this loss and what they learned from it?
I think you got to start with the offensive end again. and just looking at where things went wrong. And I think to me there's certainly, and I think a couple guys touched on this post game, but like there was just an element of I think the length and physicality took a game to adjust to, and I think they obviously started off well with the first quarter, but even then, in rewatching the first quarter, in my opinion, I felt Minnesota missed several point blank looks that I felt, they make two or three of those, and it's a 1 point game, a 3 point game. Like it felt, at least in my opinion, upon rewatching it, just like a little bit closer in the first quarter than it seemed. Granted, I thought LA's process was much better overall, and the game plan against Ant, like they were struggling with some of those things. But I think as like like I don't want to just do the cliche like play harder, but that was what everyone was echoing post game.
Yeah.
It was just like Minnesota played harder than us, and
Yeah.
sometimes it is that simple. And I think the thing for me is like the athleticism and physicality gap is a bit bigger than I anticipated. So LA, I think, is going to have to overcome that with their game planning, with their tactical adjustments. Like it's going to have to be an even bigger gap, because on paper I was kind of looking at it like, okay, it's the mind of LeBron and Luca and Austin versus the Wolves' athleticism and length, right? And seeing that kind of play out, it's like, okay, well that's that's gonna have to be at an even higher level, I think, than what I initially kind of expected. But LA left a lot of low hanging fruit in terms of the offensive side. Defensively, I'm a little, because I agree with Tim that like maybe I'm over emphasizing some of the helping stuff, but I just felt like their inability to contain Ant's penetration was just what led to some of these things. And I don't really, you could be more aggressive, I guess, with like the top side help, but then that's going to have other ripple effects within the defense. So that's something that like we thought we saw them throw in some zone in the third quarter. I thought that was kind of okay, but yeah, I mean, I think it is just kind of sticking to what they do well. But I also think it wasn't just Ant. Like Julius got downhill, Dante, like Mike Conley blew by Vando on one possession. It was just like they could not contain the ball at all. And I don't know if that was the week off and just them needing to kind of recalibrate. But defense, I mean, to be clear, I'm much more concerned about the defense longer term in this series than the offense. I think the offense should be better. They got good looks when they ran stuff. I think that like should bear out positively. The defense, I'm like, I just, they have some physical advantages that I think LA might just struggle to contain, or just have to counter kind of how they're helping and where they're helping from.
Yeah, Tim, it's a hard thing to unpack when you got limited time in these playoff series. Was it the game plan? Or was it the execution? How much? 60% this, 40% that? I don't know. Where you land on as far as I know you laid out some of your adjustments, but what do you think the team will like react to the most?
I agree with Jovan that I think I'm more concerned about the defense long term. And part of that concern for me is not knowing what JJ's got in his bag in terms of other help types. We saw them go to zone quicker than we saw them try something else, which to me is concerning. We saw them pull guys out of the game before we saw them try other tactics, which is another thing I considered a red flag. I think on both series preview pods, I'm worried. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that they went into this game expecting hedging, which is right, but then completely bamboozled and surprised and unprepared to attack a switching defense. I think their process offensively will be part of their focus. I expect defensively they're going to point to just some of the lucky shot making. I think it was a real thing in this game. They can't bet on Minnesota's process being quite as bad as it was. I know they were able to kind of shoot themselves out of it to the point that it didn't matter. They were able to add like 23 points in transition according to Synergy. I think it was 25 according to ESPN. That is something that if you play better offense, your defense will be better off. And if you can like swing just the transition game, that's really big. If just the shot making is even or is in LA's favor, that would have been a big thing. It was about a 30-point difference in this game between the shooting underperformance for LA compared to the shooting overperformance for Minnesota. And so I think some of it they're going to chalk up to, stuff happens. But the offense, I think, has to be, you have to come more with your A game, because we did not see LA like throwing their best punches, even running what they usually run against switching. I know the step up ball screens aren't something they usually run. I'd love to see it. It would fit a lot. It would help a lot. But the shorting action, like they do that all the time. Why didn't they do it? That kind of stuff surprises me. So I think we'll see them try to be more purposeful. I think they'll try to feed the post more to get LeBron going and not have to worry about him beating guys off the dribble. I think they'll be more purposeful, trying to pull the weaker Minnesota defenders into actions they're struggling to defend. Like, I think they'll just be more thoughtful and more intentional, because there was just a lot of like, all right, let's go dance, let's go make something happen. And a lot of one and done possessions where there was no rim pressure, there was no offensive rebounding pressure, and still they were getting beat on the other end of the court in transition. So I think offensive process, defensively, like you need to start brainstorming other plans. This is part of the big concern I had for the team heading into the playoffs, is just not knowing what plan B or plan C would be from a help standpoint. And so far, like game one was a failure in terms of backup plans. Maybe it was so late in the game, JJ didn't want to tip his hand. I think this is one of those few scenarios where it could make sense. Regular season, I disagree. Playoffs, like if it's Q4 and you're down 20 points, don't show them what they're going to see in the first quarter of next game. Keep that a secret. So maybe we can, hope more so than anything, that JJ's got a good plan B that he's ready to pull out if and when he needs it in game two. That is going to be one of the first things I keep an eye out for, because if they play Ant 1v1, I think he's going to get downhill. If they send the help and Minnesota counters like they did in the second half, and specifically the fourth quarter, I don't think the help's going to last long. And then we're back to 1v1 and he's getting downhill. I don't think zone's going to work all that well against this group, with the rebounding, with the perimeter shooting, with their slashing. So if there's not something else LA can find, I think we are seeing the things that I knew would doom them eventually, or thought would doom them eventually, much sooner than I anticipated.
Yeah, I'm glad in the adjustments you guys both mentioned in one way or another, the post, Luka in the post, LeBron in the post. I think that's a good way to change how Minnesota could force help, rotate the ball out, make them get different looks, mix that in a little bit more. Before we get out of here, I want to get one exceptionalism take from each of you. Hopium, moral victory, whatever you got, however you want to couch it. Jovan, what are some of the maybe bright lights, the positives the Lakers could take from this awful loss?
Well, one thing I want to know, this might be a little bit more doom and gloom before I get to the optimism, is JJ was asked during the pre fourth quarter, break, and then post game about adjustments, and he said schematically he didn't think anything needed to. There was nothing wrong.
It was
with
nothing
the game
that
plan,
Minnesota
so
was doing, right?
yeah, like I guess that would be one cause for concern. If I assume he will rewatch it and see some things that could be better, but like if the takeaway is nothing needs to change schematically, I think this could be a sweep or a 5-game series for Minnesota. But now for the optimism, I think they still can't guard Luka, which to me was like the thing coming into the series of rewatching last Western Conference Finals, and then the way that they defended him in the February 27th matchup. So I think that is an entry point into their defense. And as you just said, whether it's posting him up more or being more intentional with the types of defenders he is attacking, I think LA has some entry points, because it almost felt like Luka could kind of like, he's a magician against, like in general, but against them specifically, where it didn't matter if it was McDaniels, it didn't matter if it was Gobert. It was like he could kind of pick his matchup and just score and create an advantage on that person. But I think there are better ways to leverage that. But I also think if they are running more organized offense, you will see the cracks in Minnesota's defense. It felt like they kind of let Minnesota off the hook a bit and just allowed them to switch and just stay big and leverage their length. And like one thing we talked about going into the series was, could they get Minnesota, like who was going to adjust more? And it felt like, I mean, really, Minnesota adjusted more in a positive way. LA did not really adjust much in that game one, but they allowed Minnesota to stay big. And I think if we look at a pathway to LA winning this series. It's probably Minnesota having to downsize and maybe play one big, but they were able to play two bigs basically the entire game, or kind of just play their normal rotation. And that to me is something that LA has to do a better job dictating. So I think it starts with the offensive end, and I also think with this group, we'll see like when they're playing better offensively. I think you see just the human element of better transition defense, and guys are more focused on that end. I think it was kind of a snowball effect of guys were missing shots or just not as involved offensively. Then you see them not getting back and not having the same energy defensively. I thought it was a pretty low energy defensive performance by LA, especially in the middle part, when like this is a playoff game. This is not the regular season. Like you got to bring it. So I think Luka and like him still being able to just dictate Minnesota's defense in a way is something that I'm still encouraged by. They don't have an answer for him, and I think LA can do a better job of leveraging that in game 2 and beyond.
I have a couple things I'm going to point at. The first one is if you look at the expected points per possession for the Lakers freelance offense in this game and compare it to what we got from Minnesota on freelance, it was exactly the same. Both teams were generating exactly the same quality of shots, and I would say that LA drastically underperformed in terms of like generating good looks, not just the shot making, which we know was a big difference, but generating good looks. There are some easy counters, easy things they can do, go to the post more like we talked about. That should be better. And this was one of LA's worst freelance games of the season. In terms of the organized offense, the Lakers were better in the quality of possessions they were generating. So they held par on one, they were better in the other. Usually you win those games. It was shot making and it was transition that were two of the biggest swing factors. The transition, I don't expect to continue to be in Minnesota's favor. The shot making, the discrepancy between the two teams is unlikely to be like this in the future. So between those, other factors, it should get better. And then control what you can control, run your stuff, lean on the fact that you were getting really good looks from your sets. You were generating like 1.5, 1.6 points per possession running your sets. Keep doing that. Like, I don't think I should be tuning in Tuesday night, late Tuesday night for me, and watching JJ Redick on a play-by-play basis have a difficult decision between being given a box of cookies and getting punched in the face, which feels like the two outcomes running a set versus freelancing. It's so stark. It's so different. They have to see it, right? They have to see it. So that's the first part of this. The second part of this is this whole season, we've seen the Lakers organized offense, right, kind of go down and down and down. There have only been 2 times this year where it's really spiked. And both times it was when JJ was asked about the organized offense, and his responses, kind of like yesterday, weren't, oh, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's go do it. It was more defensive, or, hey, we're doing great. Don't worry about it. Or we track this, we're rarely random. What he said was either defensive or didn't make me feel good. However, immediately after it, we did see the spikes. So I think drawing your attention to it could be helpful. And I don't know, Jovan's got a credential, so maybe a beat reporter can be our savior in this series. Who knows?
So what you're saying is the Lakers' future rests on my ability to pressure JJ.
I will, if you ask the question, you can only, like, there's only upside from there, Jovan.
All right, I will do it.
He's going to reference you in the question. Per Cranjis McBasketball, that sounds very professional.
Yeah, what was your offensive organization rate in game 1? 98%.
Basically what he said last time. But then it went up.
My hopium of all this is Naz Reid, McDaniels, 19 for 25 from the field, 9 for 12 from 3. Yeah, a lot of those were open, but that's still incredible shooting. Feels closer to a ceiling than a middle or a floor. And then Austin and LeBron, 19 points, 16 points. They felt like a rough game from them offensively. So hopefully those things meet in the middle and we have a bit more of a competitive game in that respect. So, yeah, that's it. Jovan, you're awesome, man. I love talking basketball with you. Seriously, one of the best reporters asking thoughtful questions and somebody who can chop it up on the nerdiest Lakers pod imaginable.
I appreciate you guys for having me. I'm obviously a big fan of the pod. I listen to everything you guys drop, and you guys make me smarter. So thank you for your service.
Appreciate you, brother. As always, check out Jovan's stuff at The Athletic. Follow, like, subscribe to Buha's blog and YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your pods. My man is live. Late Night Gang is representing all the time. I would be surprised if there's anyone in our audience who doesn't also follow your show, but if you do not, make sure to go do that. And Tim, let's get it, man. I'm gonna be at the game on Tuesday, so no stream for us, but I will be in the Discord losing my mind no matter what happens.
Love it. Let's go, Lakers. Hey, Lakers in 5 still within the range of outcomes. I wouldn't predict it at this point. I think 6 or 7
That's
makes more
Lakers
sense.
exceptionalism, baby.
But,
Let's go.
It's possible. It's possible. We'll see.
All right, folks. Usual Discord promo. You know the drill. We appreciate everybody for being here. Shout out again to Jovan, and have a great rest of your Sunday. Talk to you later.